Ruin My Childhood.
Thank you for listening to Ruin My Childhood, the podcast where you decide if some things are better left in the past. I'm Mike.
And I'm Kat.
And hello, Kat. How are you today?
I'm considering we're in the midst of a pandemic and the economy is crumbling. Pretty good.
Good.
How about you?
You know, work's slowing down a little bit, but in a good way. Like, I've been burning the candle at both ends. I've been busier in quarantine than pre-quarantine, so it's been kind of nice the last couple of days. It's kind of slowed down a little bit, and I had a really great conversation with one of my clients and got to learn a lot more about them, and it was pretty cool. So I've actually had a pretty good couple of days, at least.
Awesome.
What are we going to be talking about on this episode? What are we going to watch and then discuss?
A film that has the distinction of being on Roger Ebert's top 10 most hated list.
Oh.
Tommy Boy.
Tommy Boy. What do you remember about this movie?
Not much. I don't think I watched this at all when I was a kid. I did see it several times on the break room TV
in
at
Target.
Work. Yeah,
it was on the break room
Target.
a lot. Yeah,
especially like I think Black Friday. It was on loop.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I remember a lot about this movie. This was one of my favorite movies when I was high school age. So I watched this all the time when it was on TV as a kid. But when I started getting my DVD collection going, this was one of the first DVDs I had. It was the Holy Schnikes edition. We don't have it anymore. I hadn't watched this movie in a long time, so I'm sure I got rid of it. But
probably.
I really liked this movie when I was younger. I really liked Chris Farley. I was a big fan of this movie, Beverly Hills Ninja, Almost Heroes, and Black Sheep. So he just had like a string of these movies, and it wasn't until we got ready to watch this that I realized these were all within a 3-year period. He had a very short movie career. I mean, he was on SNL for a while, but
he was being groomed to be this megastar, this comedy heavyweight, if you will, and he blew up and burned out in like 3 years.
Yeah, he was going to do, he was going to be Shrek. He actually recorded all the dialogue for Shrek, and then he passed away.
Wow.
So they recast it with Mike Myers.
It's so weird because this feels so much earlier than Shrek.
It does. I mean, because of the delay, it ended up being a few years after he died, but I remember just him being a huge part of my childhood, and then realizing as an adult 3 years isn't that much of a timeline. Like, it's a really short period for somebody in their 30s. But
if anything, for adults, it was bigger. Yeah,
what's weird is it's 3 years is the time we get between, Avengers movies.
Right.
Whereas a kid, 3 years was a huge chunk. Like, I was 10 when he passed away.
Right. And kids, of course, are emulating everything that they see on TV and in the movies. And even if we weren't allowed to watch this as a kid, we were still seeing clips of it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I must have watched this with my cousins dozens of times over my life. I loved Chris Farley as a kid. I was really excited every time I saw his movies coming out. So I remember a lot about this movie. I mean, the general plot is Tommy's dad dies and he has to take over the family business and sell like 1 million brake pads or something like that to save the factory. But there are a lot of good one-liners in here. Like, I still quote this movie fairly often, even though I probably haven't watched this movie since we first started dating. But I mean, Holy Schnikes. I used to say that all the time when we first started dating. It used to drive you crazy.
Yeah.
Fat guy in a little coat. David Spade's great in this. I remember there's like a masturbation scene, and they talk about who's your favorite little rascal. Was it Spanky? What? Yeah, there's a lot of just stupid one-liners. I'm actually kind of excited to go back and watch it, although I'm pretty sure it's not going to be as good as I remember it.
Yeah, I don't remember really liking any part of it that I saw. It's just not really my kind of humor, and I mean, like, I hate to approach this on a low note, but
maybe it'll pleasantly surprise you.
So many films from that time, when they have an overweight lead actor, it's just fat jokes.
Well, the thing is, yes, his movies absolutely have a lot of fat jokes, but one of the things he was known for was his physical comedy. Like on SNL, he did backflips and stuff.
That's crazy.
He did cartwheels. He did his own stunts on most of his movies, as far as I know. I know, like Beverly Hills Ninja, he did most of his own stunts. He's known for doing a lot of physical comedy. So he's big, but he can move. In interviews, people always talk about how he was an amazing dancer and he could do gymnastics. He was a football player, a rugby player. He's a very physical, funny guy. So I'm kind of excited to go back and watch this. I guess it's time to check in with our listeners and see what they had to say about this movie. I've got one from Orlando Salcido, and it just says, "The Bees."
The Bees.
I don't know what that is.
Torta X79 just sent me a GIF that is David Spade and Chris Farley. It looks like they're scream singing in a convertible.
I'm sure that happens in the movie. I know it's like a buddy road trip movie, so I'm sure there's a cliche them singing together scene.
Right.
I've got one from Cody Leach that says, "Who's your favorite little rascal? Alfalfa or Spanky?" Sinner. I don't know the inflection of sinner, but I definitely remember this. There's a scene where Tommy catches David Spade's character leering at some woman who's swimming or skinny dipping or something like that, and he just makes a bunch of jerk off jokes.
Nice.
Classic.
Really selling this movie.
All right, well, let's just go watch it.
All right.
Paramount Pictures presents
Holy schnikes.
Chris Farley, David Spade,
What'd you do?
blazing a trail across America. Tommy Boy, rated PG-13.
So we just watched Tommy Boy, and I know this type of movie isn't normally your cup of tea, but you laughed quite a bit throughout the movie.
Oh, it's just so
Despite yourself.
stupid. Like, there are parts that I laugh because it's so bad. There were, I think, maybe like a handful, like literally a handful of jokes that I genuinely found funny and was entertained by.
There were some pretty good jokes in this movie. I actually laughed quite a bit in this movie, a lot more than you, but this is more my cup of tea than yours.
Definitely.
I forgot that Rob Lowe was in this film, and he's great in this film. His character is funny because he's a capable, smart criminal, but for whatever reason, like, he always gets hurt, like,
Just
in
doesn't work
nonsensical
out.
ways. I thought that was hilarious, and I completely forgot about that aspect of this movie. David Spade was kind of a dick. Like, I thought he was supposed to be like the straight edge kind of guy who got passed up for promotions, but he's kind of an asshole in this movie. I forgot that he was
Just like real life.
Yeah. You wanna summarize it before we get going?
Why do you always ask me if I want to summarize
Because
it?
one day you may surprise
One
our fans
day-
and do it.
No.
All right, I'll summarize it real quick. Like, pretty straightforward plot. Tommy Boy is a kind of just a fat idiot. He went to college for 7 years before finally getting his degree. He comes home and he's being groomed to take over the family business right at the time where, even though the economy's down, this business is booming. They're expanding. So his dad is in automotive parts manufacturing, and they're debuting their new state-of-the-art brake pads. And that father dies shortly after getting married, and now Tommy has to take over the business and sell 500,000 brake pads in about a month to get enough money to pay the bank for a loan that's kind of keeping him afloat. And he's not a very good salesperson. He's a bit of an idiot. And meanwhile, his new mother-in-law and stepbrother are actually married and trying to steal money and scam the company out for everything it's worth.
Yeah.
And then it's like a buddy road trip movie.
How long had the dad and Bo Derek supposedly been dating?
It's unclear. It doesn't say. It just says that, they've been dating for a little bit.
We should talk about that whole situation there.
Go for it. Tell me what you want to say.
Oh, man. I mean, it's a product of its time in that the majority of the women that are featured in this film are there to be exploited. Like, we first meet Bo Derek, and she's in a swimsuit.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Well,
She's
to
then
be fair,
braless in her wedding dress.
To be fair,
She's like 50.
she is an older woman.
She's like 50.
She still looks great
Why
for
would
her
she
age.
be braless in a wedding dress?
Because she's Bo Derek. I did like when she's introduced. She's swimming in the pool. You're right. It's exploitive. She comes out in slow motions, waving her hair, dripping. And then Tommy asks his dad, like, is she for me? And he's like, no,
Ew.
son, she's for me. I asked her to marry me. And Tommy's like, what did she say? And then he goes on to say, he's like, Dad, she's a perfect 10. like the movie.
Wah wah, because they were both in 10.
Yeah. I do agree that was a little weird. And
well, in every interaction, like, and anytime a woman shows up, an attractive woman shows up, the assumption is, oh, which one of us is going to have sex with her?
yeah,
There's usually even clear commentary to that effect.
There's in the beginning of the movie, I kind of like the opening of the movie. Tommy is running late to school, and he has a series of mishaps that causes him to miss the bus. He runs through sprinklers, runs into a pole, runs into an open door, all these different things. And then it leads into a montage of him as an adult doing the same thing, running into things as he's late to a final. And he stops and sees attractive girls and like, oh, hey, how are you doing?
It's
You're
stupid.
I mean, that's from Ferris Bueller. You got to give him that one.
It's just gross. It's gross.
Then
and
the David Spade scene.
It's something I don't really miss about movies from this era. Although, I mean, I guess modern comedy probably does. I just stopped watching dumb modern comedy.
I think it's not as bad as it was back then. Like back then it was exploitive. At least they try to work in a character being sexy into the story now.
Right.
So I think probably now this type of comedy is not as big, but I think the closest thing to it was a few years back. I don't even remember what the name of the movie was, but it was Jason Sudeikis, Jennifer Aniston, and they're basically drug mules and they're going across the border. There's a point where Jennifer Aniston does a striptease, but as far as I recall, they like ham-fist it into the story as a reason why she had to do it.
Right.
So at least they try to disguise it as a plot related. I don't know.
I mean,
Not that I'm justifying it. I'm saying it at least, unfortunately women are always going to be objectified in movies.
right.
Hopefully not forever, but for the foreseeable future.
One thing with that character, I can't figure out why they chose to kill off the dad. Like, it would have been, if anything, more interesting if the dad was still alive and you had the fake son / real husband
Working against him.
Yeah.
That would have been interesting if like maybe the dad had the heart attack and he couldn't go on the business trip. So he's like in the hospital and Tommy has to take over for the trip.
But that's a big ask, having a plot for a movie that falls back on fat jokes.
That's true. That's true. I mean, it's not a good movie. But
No.
I laughed throughout. Like one of the first things I laughed at was he's taking his history final and the question was something like, these three people signed the Declaration of Independence: Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and blank Hancock. And he just kind of looks confused. And then he gets a big, stupid grin on his face and then writes Herbie. And then not even 5 minutes later, he's in the office. David Spade, who plays Richard, is walking him through the office. And then he runs into the dad's like, hey, I need your John Hancock on this. And Tommy's just... without skipping a beat, it's Herbie Hancock, you idiot.
Stupid.
I thought it was really funny.
When he gets the results back from taking that test, you see that it's being printed off of a computer before it's posted on the wall. And when it's being printed off, Helen Keller is on the list, and she got an,
She got an F.
Someone should have gotten the poor girl a tutor. I mean, come on. Someone splashed some water on her.
That's absurd that she got an F. She was very well educated and very smart.
She was.
Historically inaccurate.
It's just like it's such
Didn't
a
she become a communist?
stupid, insensitive 90s joke. I don't know. Did she?
I think she did. I think she wrote some like very socialist stuff.
I think a lot of people were a pale pink back then.
Ooh.
I
I don't know why I went ooh with that.
We start off the movie, and Tommy Boy is like already 40 years old.
He was only 33 when he died. He was 30.
He looked significantly older.
I mean, he was overweight and on drugs.
Just going bald. Poor guy. Rob Lowe's introduction as a villain was kind of like a villain's introduction on Rocky and Bullwinkle. It's like, here is a villain. Let's have him wring his hands and twist his mustache.
Yeah.
It was so obvious and hilarious, but it kind of worked. Like, and I wish more of the movie was that over the top obvious, because there are points where like it's so obvious and over the top that you kind of wish they'd just gone with it and taken a little bit further.
Taken a little more liberty. And just
Yeah.
own it. I mean,
Rob Lowe, is he even credited in this movie?
he's not. So apparently he was working on The Stand when this movie filmed, the miniseries based off the Stephen King novel. And I guess contractually he wasn't supposed to be in anything else.
Yeah, it's
So
a huge issue.
He did this as a favor because he was friends with Chris Farley. And did this as an uncredited role, which is pretty crazy how large this role is for an uncredited role.
Yeah.
Because he's not a small part.
It's got a lot of stuff. Apparently, like, him being on set caused some tension.
I read that.
Is it Peter Segal?
I think it's Seagal.
Seagal.
I think it's Seagal.
Director. Did he write this?
Yes.
Did he co-write this with anyone else?
I'm sure Chris Farley got involved. I'm sure a bunch of people.
So in an interview, he said that at one point during the production, Rob Lowe was almost forced to drop out of the film.
Huh. Why was that? I read something else about Rob Lowe.
Scheduling conflicts.
Oh, got it. Okay.
They held auditions to replace him. Matthew McConaughey was considered, which I thought would have been really interesting to see in that role. And then eventually, like, it got sorted out. He did an amazing job with the role. But on set, there was, like, some jealousy with
I heard that
Chris
one.
Farley
I read that one.
and David Spade.
Because they were best friends in real life. Like, David Spade still talks about Chris Farley fairly frequently and what a great friend he was. But yeah, what was it? Something along the lines of, like, Chris Farley got jealous of Rob Lowe because he was hanging out with David Spade, something like that?
Yeah, I guess, like, two of them went out for a drink together without inviting Chris Farley, and then Chris the next day was like, "How was Rob Lowe?" Like, it's just so
you actually did a pretty
weird.
good Chris Farley voice. That was pretty good.
It's just such an odd thing to think of Chris Farley being jealous when David Spade is the one who's a little like, he's such a jerk about everything. On this set, he would not let the hairstylist style his hair.
Huh.
Which is why it looks like crap the entire film. Like, let's just give it up for David Spade being a bitch and ruining things for himself.
Oh.
I love him. He's great.
He's funny. I like him in a lot of stuff.
Like, why is he so insecure?
Because he's like 4'2".
I guess that's like most comedians, though.
Most comedians are very...
They're deeply insecure. They're deeply unhappy. So they're nasty, snappy little vipers. I don't know. They're just, they're nasty people most of the time.
So to go back to Rob Lowe, I think he did a great job setting up Chris Farley for what I thought was one of the funniest things in the movie. And it's stupid, but this speaks to Chris Farley's physical humor.
I think it might be my least favorite part of the film.
Are you talking about at the gas station when he's dancing?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I really liked they go cow tipping. You know, this Rob Lowe's character is supposed to be from California. And so he asked Chris Farley, "Hey, what is there to do in Ohio?" And Chris Farley's like, "Oh, there's a bunch of stuff." So they go cow tipping.
At this point, Tommy thinks this is his new stepbrother.
His new stepbrother. He's super excited.
So they're bonding.
Yeah. So they go cow tipping and they almost get killed by a farmer, but they end up falling in the mud. So Rob Lowe's spraying Chris Farley off in the gas station parking lot. And Chris Farley just starts dancing like the Flashdance song and is like, "I'm a maniac on the floor." Like a lesser comedian, I don't think could have pulled that off. But I thought it was really funny because he completely just owned it and went for it. And
his physicality is amazing. It kind of defies the laws of physics.
it does. It's weird. And like we'll get into more of his jokes later. But I kind of want to just talk about Rob Lowe for a little bit because you brought up the mustache twirling and like a Rocky and Bullwinkle.
He's such a good villain.
He is. And he is like, it is like a Rocky and Bullwinkle or Looney Tunes type of character because this guy is capable. Just like, I almost want to say like Wile E. Coyote kind of thing where they know what they're doing, they're capable, but they still just get destroyed with cartoon antics. So there's a point where Rob Lowe is explaining his plan to his mom wife and he's peeing and he's just peeing, talking about how stupid Tommy is, but then he ends up peeing on an electric fence and he's like flying. It's like 50 feet.
That legitimately made me laugh because it's so out of the blue. And then her reaction.
She doesn't even care.
She doesn't care.
And then it's like throughout the movie, he's trying to undermine Tommy's thing. So Tommy struggles to sell and he ends up getting good at selling. So Rob Lowe goes to, he goes to sabotage the trucks so that way nobody can do deliveries. And he doesn't go and like cut the brake lines or anything. He brings a sniper rifle. And then there's like a dog on a chain. So he's getting ready to shoot the truck. And then the dog comes running and jumps and the chain is just too short. So he's like, it stops like inches from Rob Lowe's face. So he ends up like using a sniper rifle and he starts steadying it on an open car door.
Right.
And then he goes to close the door a little bit to get a better shot, and then he shoots, and it like ricochets, or oh no, the seatbelt. It's one of those 90s cars where the seatbelt does itself. So when he closes the door, the seatbelt closes on him. He ends up firing the rifle on accident. It shoots a sign. The sign flies, cuts the chain that the dog's on, and he gets mauled by a dog. And then like later on, he gets like stuck in a vacuum tube, and like his shirt gets ripped off. And then another place, he's at the end of the movie.
And
when
that's
he's
another part where no one reacts to what's happening.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like he's trying to make it happen. He keeps leaning further against the vacuum tube, and then all of a sudden it sucks off his shirt. Like, what happened to the buttons? Did the buttons just fly off? No one reacted?
Yeah.
This bothers me.
Yeah, and then like every time he does something horrible happens to him that just, it's like Final Destination, Wile E. Coyote nonsense. And I thought that was great. He played it very straight. Like he played, like when you have these weird, obscure, just stupid characters, it's like Leslie Nielsen in the Naked Gun movies and Airplane.
Exactly.
You play it straight and it's funnier. Like you don't play it like it's a comedy. He played this like it was a drama, and it works.
Yeah, I think those moments work a lot better with that character than the other places in the film where they tried to do it.
I agree.
It did take 14 minutes for there to actually be a joke that I thought was funny.
What was that?
But then they get married really, really quickly. So
it's like the next scene.
They've like just met, they get married, and then bam, he dies at the wedding reception.
I thought that scene was actually pretty effective because a couple of things happened to show a lot about Tommy Sr., I guess. He's doing business at the wedding. Like he closes a major sale, and he does something along the lines, and this is a joke / anecdote kind of thing that comes up multiple times in the movie. Tommy tries to use this line, but it's something along the lines of, I can inspect a T-bone by shoving my head up a cow's ass, or I can just trust the butcher. And so he closes a major deal, and then he's making his little toast, and then he brings Tommy up, and they have like this really heartfelt moment where they sing their favorite song together. And once again, a really great physical routine from Chris Farley. And then he dies, and I thought that was a really effective way to kill the dad because he's having this really great moment with Tommy. And it also kind of throws a wrinkle into Rob Lowe's and Bo Derek's plan, because they were planning on doing a long con over the course of a year or so to get more funds. So this had made them have to change their plan and set all the stuff in motion. So I actually thought his death was a pretty effective way of moving the plot forward. And I actually felt really bad for Tommy, because he now went from being a college idiot, just frat boy, to now he's got an entire town's livelihood on his shoulders.
I do think it's funny, though, that the dad is so obsessed with Tommy as his son and so proud of him. And yet, at no point does he look at his kid and be like, oh, I need to teach him how to actually run this company.
Well, I think that was the point was going to be going, and then he just died.
But then you would think that he would be preparing him a little bit earlier because he knows how stupid the kid was.
Right.
Like, I don't know. If
I
my
think
kid
he was
that
blind
dumb,
to how dumb Tommy actually was.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was super proud that he graduated college. He didn't acknowledge that it was a 7-year stretch. I think he's just so in love with his son that he looks past the flaws and accepts his son for who he is. But I think that was the plan, because there is a scene where he's arguing with like the chairman and the board and the bank, saying, I'm never going to sell this company. I'm going to teach my son how to run the business. So I think that was the plan. He was fat and old too, and died.
Oh, jeez. Like, well, that's the consequences.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
He did a really impressive cartwheel right before his dad died. He did that's how he figured out his dad died. Like, he did a cartwheel to like the music, and then he does this like karate pose, and then he looks over and his dad's dead.
It was like a dance off. Your turn. Wait.
Aww.
I guess he danced off. He meets this poor girl.
Michelle?
She just gets thrown in as a love interest with like zero common ground.
Well, they went to high school together.
Yeah, but like, what else is there?
He's funny.
Okay.
He's the star of the movie.
I
it's
guess.
in the script.
Anyway, they somehow end up on a boat together.
Right after the dad died.
The shots of him weighing down the boat are pretty funny.
That was really funny.
Because it's probably just real. It's just a small boat.
Yeah, it's a little Oh, this is where one of my favorite jokes comes from. How many times have I said "quit playing with your dinghy" since you've known me?
I don't remember you ever saying that, but I'll take your word for it.
It's a way to ruin my joke. I literally say it all the time. Anytime there's a boat, like, "Hey, quit playing with your dinghy."
Do you?
Yes.
Usually you say, "Hey, look at all the schooners."
Well, that's if they're sailboats. But in general, if there's just like a little boat, "Hey, look at the dinghy. Quit playing with your dinghy."
I did enjoy that her character stands up and defends him when the group of
the kids,
and the group of tweens come out and just start relentlessly laying into him
because he's fat.
But this movie is like 80% fat jokes.
Yes, it is. I mean, there are some other good jokes. I think we can kind of just burn through the middle of the movie because it's essentially a montage. It's a road trip movie at this point where he does a bunch of sales calls where he just bombs.
Right.
And then they do your generic, like, "Oh, we're going to go get gas. We're going to go get food." So it's all the generic road trip stuff.
And it does all the generic bad taste 90s jokes.
Yeah.
We get we get gay and retard both being used
Multiple times.
in the first 3 minutes.
Yeah.
We have a Helen Keller joke in the first
3-4 minutes.
like 30 seconds.
They probably say retard in this movie like 10 times.
A lot.
Yeah.
And it's just a sign of the times. Like, we can look at it as, oh, it was so recent and yet, yikes, people are doing this. But when you think about it in the terms of like people's perceptions about ableism and fat shaming, like, I think that's a pretty good amount of progress that we can be sitting here
Right.
not that far removed from this and be like, oh, yikes, that doesn't sit well anymore.
It's kind of like a jolt. Like it does
It
take you out of
is.
the system when you hear things like that.
And then you also feel bad, like, God, how many people are so deeply hurt by these jokes that when we were kids, us laughing at them was like,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We weren't forced to think about it.
Yeah.
We didn't care, I guess. So it is really different to have to like look at any comedy from the 90s and have to kind of process those in with the good jokes.
Right. It is tricky. I mean, even things more recent, like I went back and watched some older Will Ferrell movies, the Will Ferrell movies from like 2004 to 2008. Mm-hmm. And I can't sit through those movies anymore.
No.
They're that bad. But to get back to this kind of thing, it's generic road trip buddy movie with a few, I'd say, highlights. So one of the things, once again, it's not that funny, but I don't know why I liked it so much. But one of the first big things to cause conflict between them is they go to get gas. And Richard goes in to get information on where they're going. And Tommy's supposed to fill up the tank, but they're too far away from the actual gas pump. So he backs up with the car door open and it damages the car and he fixes it and closes it. And then Richard goes to open the door and it just completely comes off. And Tommy's just like, "What did you do?" Like, it's stupid, but I loved it.
Well, and I really do enjoy the car because once it gets to this point where they start destroying it, like you reach a certain point where you're like, that's not a car. That's like 3 cars stuck together with a different car's wheels. And it just keeps progressively getting
being
worse.
held together by duct tape and garbage bags.
And then we have the scene with the buck, which like I don't remember this. I'm sure I've seen it at some point, but it is so bad and so ridiculous. And it gets you just to the point where you think you can't handle how stupid it is.
You were dying at this part. This was probably the hardest you laughed.
And the last shot is like it cuts to again a completely different vehicle with a buck, just like a real buck, just standing on top of it before it jumps away.
Well, the thing that makes it
that part just completely broke me.
Well, the part that makes it even more ridiculous is they run over the deer or the buck in the daytime, and they realize they're going to be late for their meeting. They don't want to leave it on the road, so they put it in their car and they say they're going to take it to a vet later. But they go to their sales call. I think this was their first like successful sales call, and then they get back in their car. They're driving around. They're singing songs. They're having a great time.
Covered in ticks.
Too. It would
Fleas
stink.
and ticks.
So Richard keeps talking about there's no eating in the car. He's all about his car, and it's already had some damage at this point. But still, you don't think he would leave a deer in the car that long. It's now nighttime. The deer wakes up. They freak out. It destroys the car, like you mentioned. And then, yeah, it's just up there. So it's absurd. It's like, why did they keep the deer in the car for so goddamn long? Or,
It's ridiculous.
so darn long.
I did enjoy the scene where they get pulled over, and so he hatches a plan to pretend that there are bees in the car. That was clever.
We got to talk about this scene that one of our listeners brought up, as well as I brought it up as something I remember about the movie, but the little rascal part of the movie. So to go back to your point where you talked
Another
about
exploiting women.
Exactly.
Like, she is literally just in that movie for that scene.
Yep. So there's a woman who they're at a hotel. Their room is right outside the pool, so they can see the pool. And this Tommy's supposed to be going and getting food, right as this beautiful woman is swimming, and
Decides that she's going to skinny dip in the pool with all the hotel windows facing the pool.
right.
Because that's totally a thing that women do.
Yep. In the 90s in the Midwest, sure.
It's just so tired and boring.
So David Spade's peeping on her, and he starts jerking it. And
So gross.
Yep. And then Tommy comes in when he's like mid-stroke, and he darts into bed, does the normal thing, like covers himself with blankets. And you have one of those things that's classic 90s comedy where you just list a bunch of jerk-off jokes. So Tommy's just laying into him all these different things. Oh, did you get a good tug? Whatever, right? And then it cuts to them asleep in their separate beds. And then Tommy wakes up and he's just like, hey, Richard, who was your favorite little rascal? Was it Alfalfa? Or was it Spanky? Sinner. Just like, after all the jerk-off jokes he made, like that one, he just adds Sinner. It almost seemed like a Family Guy joke.
There are just some real gems in there. and then the movie keeps going, and you're like, oh, where'd it go?
Fat guy in a little coat.
Fat guy
That's
in a little
classic.
coat was actually an inside joke that he and David Spade had when they were trying to write. And he would always prank David with it by being like, okay, I've got something. And like he's acting like he's going to present it. And then it's just fat guy in a little coat again.
It's kind of like with your YouTube for your crafts. Since year one, I've been telling you to make the jelly bookmarks. And every time you're like, I don't have an idea. What craft should I make? I'm like, I got one. And you fall for it every time.
Jelly bookmarks. Yeah, so I guess eventually they just thought if they kept laughing at it, then maybe other people would too.
I laughed.
It's just ridiculous. Like, as soon as he puts on the coat, you're like, oh, I know what's going to happen. But that's just how it goes, I guess.
All right. This one, I didn't think this was funny this time around, but I used to have this as a ringtone. But just before they close their first major sale, they're in the diner they're trying to get food, but they just missed breakfast, and it's going to be a couple hours before the lunch menu starts. And so Chris Farley goes on this long rant about how he's terrible at sales, and he's got like a roll or something. He's like, he almost does like a Lenny from Of Mice and Men kind of thing as well. So it's a whole thing that he's got. He's like, this is my sale. It's also like my little pet, and I stroke it and pet it and nurture it, and then I just do it too hard and I kill it. And he's like, I killed my sale. That used to be my text ringtone, like when you could first add ringtones.
What? Of all things.
It was specifically for my cousin.
Oh, geez.
But yeah, I had that, like, you killed my sale.
Early on in his salesman journey, there's a scene where he's trying to make a point and illustrate his point by using the model cars that are on someone's desk. And this scene is kind of like someone just hogtied David Spade before putting him in his clothing. And Chris Farley's improvising, and David Spade just has to watch. It's like he's being punished. It's so strange. He doesn't contribute anything to the scene. It's almost like he's angry that he's there and trying not to contribute. And Chris Farley just goes over the top.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. He literally lights it on fire before anything happens. There are no consequences.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I mean, he lost the sale. That was the story he was telling the waitress about how he killed the sale by being an idiot.
It's just odd. There are these like really odd moments in there where everyone was kind of like, okay, we got to let Chris have his moment of improv, and the take just went long and everyone went with it.
Yeah.
Ended up in the
I'm
movie.
sure that happened a lot. So he finally closes his first sale, and then all of a sudden he's amazing at sales. Like he ends up outstripping his dad in sales, which I don't buy.
No.
And like, because even when you hear his pitches, it's like, yeah, he's charismatic, but he's still saying stupid things that most business people would be like, what?
Yeah.
Granted, he has that handicap because they all knew his dad, but still, like, it seemed, I don't think he should have been so good that he was better than his dad in like a week in sales. But they did it. They hit their threshold. Rob Lowe has to hack the computers and breaks the system. So all the orders get messed up. So everybody cancels their orders. The company's going to go bankrupt. They're going to sell to Dan Aykroyd. He's in this movie briefly. He plays like a multinational, or sorry, he plays a national auto shop owner. So he has franchises all across the country. So they're going to sell to him. So basically, Richard and Tommy set up like a terrorist situation. They strap a fake bomb to Chris Farley so that way they can stop the merger of the sale. They save the day. That's pretty much how the movie ends. I didn't really write down anything towards the end of the movie. I was just like, oh,
no, the only thing I got was stunt guy who burst out of the bathroom was hella darker.
I don't think that was a stuntman. I think he was just hairy.
He just only had dark body hair on his bum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Because he's known for doing his stunts.
One of the last big gigs in it was Rob Lowe landing and crushing his nards.
Yeah. He gets thrown onto a crash test dummy car. Then he like gets launched into a chair. He thinks he's safe, and then like a sandbag just falls out of nowhere on him. And then the movie just ends, and everything's happy and great.
It's just odd.
I really thought it fell off in the third act. Like, I thought it was getting better. I was finding myself enjoying it more and more as the movie progressed. And then once they're like, oh, we need to wrap this up, like, I didn't buy them being flight attendants. So they impersonate flight attendants because they can't get tickets to Chicago. They do some stupid physical humor where in the safety announcements wasn't that great.
They use retard in the safety announcement.
Exactly. They go to the tower where Dan Aykroyd works, and they do a fake bank robbery on accident, and then they do the same thing to get back in the building. And like, I don't think anything at the end really was great. Like, it wrapped up too cleanly. They just through happenstance found out that Rob Lowe and the mom were married like the same afternoon. Like, everything was a little too convenient and too easy. Like, this guy's still a criminal. Like,
it was
like, he would be in prison.
Yeah.
For doing it, even though they're road flares, but he essentially kidnapped people. He still held people against their will. Like, he's a felon.
It just gets cleanly wrapped up into a happy little ending and tied with a bow.
Yeah. I mean, this was pre 9/11.
I guess that makes a difference.
But yeah, it really fell off at the end for me. Like, his whole gambit was to get Dan Aykroyd's character to buy the brake pads, and then they would have enough money. And then he does it because they do it on the news. And it was so contrived.
If the company was that close to being on the edge, then that really just gets them in the green, right?
Well, that was the point. It gets them into the green and gets them enough money to pay the down payment on the loan. Because they had a 30-day collateral because Tommy put up his stocks and his house. Like, he sold his house.
It's just like there were a bunch of really bad business decisions made, and then more bad business decisions, and then they somehow expected this idiot to fix it, and it did fix it.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
It's just too clean. Like, if it was a longer movie, like Major Leagues, the baseball movie, they get better over a season. And then by the end of the season, they're really good. Like, this is a guy got really good became a master salesman in less than a month. Like, that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. Apparently, some work on this script was done by... Rumor has it that Fred Wolf did some uncredited work on this script.
Oh. Which
is not at all surprising when you remember that he did The House Bunny.
Oh.
Joe Dirt 2, Beautiful Loser. Joe Dirt, Little Nicky, Dirty Work, Black Sheep, Mad Families, Dickie Roberts' former child
bunch
star.
of David Spade movies.
Right, so like it's definitely his wheelhouse there.
Yeah. He probably was an SNL writer as well at some point, I imagine.
They are all buddies, I guess. The original working title was Billy the Third, A Midwestern, Which I think
That's
is a
good.
freaking
I like
great
that.
title. Lorne Michaels said that it needed to be changed because he was working on Billy Madison. Other names that were considered were Fat Chance and XL.
Hey, at least they showed restraint on the fat jokes on that, hun.
That is my final commentary on
Yeah.
this film.
So
It's just so sad. Like, it could have done so many things better. And instead, it just fell back on fat shaming.
I'm going to go different than I thought. So going into this episode, I thought I was going to be one of these wishy-washy ones like, yeah, it's not a good movie, but there's nostalgia. I went in expecting this to be like me not making a decision as to whether or not it ruined my childhood. Just taking that middle of the ground road that we'd like to take, even though we really should make a decision. But I'm going to say it did ruin my childhood because I really liked a lot of this movie. But the ending just took me out of it. I didn't think the ending was very good. So by the end of the movie, I was just like, I want this to be over.
Right.
But there was a high at a certain point. Like I really enjoyed, I'd say, a good 2/3 of this film, and then I really hated 1/3.
Yeah.
So-
I think it's so weird for me because there are some parts that are genuinely funny jokes, but they're kind of like the things that are hidden, and they're like side moments that were kind of happy accidents. Those are the things that are really funny about this to me. And just knowing what I know about the production and the interpersonal dynamics, that is way more interesting to me on this than the actual movie was.
So I'm torn in that I'm actually glad we watched it. I'm enjoyed watching it.
I could have used that time for something else.
I get that, but it was kind of nice going. I saw a Chris Farley something or other on Facebook not too long ago, and I actually started thinking about the Chris Farley movies again. So it was kind of nice watching this and going, yeah, it's about what I thought it was going to be. I remember liking this as a kid. I've watched it once as an adult. I don't need to seek this out again. So I feel like there's a little bit of a closure with the film.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if it wasn't Chris Farley, like if you had a different fat actor, quote unquote fat actor, like if you had Kevin James doing this movie, I don't think it would have been enjoyable. Like I don't think Kevin James has the same kind of...
But it speaks to the quality of the script that we do think of this role as interchangeable between overweight actors.
Right. That's the next where my mind goes. But Chris Farley just had something different. I think he had that superstar potential. Like you said at the top of the episode, they were grooming him to blow up.
Like he could have learned to act and been amazing.
Yeah, I think he would have been great because I was doing a little bit of research and apparently he was a wonderful person. Everybody loved him. Apparently, like he grew up in the Midwest, came out here, and he like donated a ton of money to charity. Anytime he saw a homeless person on the street, he would give them money or food. Like apparently he was an amazing person.
Right. It feels bad to like on a dead saint's work.
Right. And but I'm glad I watched this. I won't come back to it.
I'm not gonna watch it ever
like
again.
This is not a movie when we have kids someday where I go, this was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. Like this is not one that I'm gonna seek out again. But I'm glad I watched it.
I was subjected to this in the break room at work. Repeatedly.
Like I'm torn as to whether or not I want to visit more Chris Farley movies, or should I just say, hey, he was great for his time, he made me laugh, but I don't want to like ruin the memory.
Right.
I'm torn because I kind of want to watch Beverly Hills Ninja and I kind of want to watch Black Sheep, but I also don't want to go back.
To leave him on his pedestal, in my opinion, because the more we examine it, the worse it's going to get.
Yeah.
And if we try and think about what his career would have done these days, like that's just depressing.
Yeah. So on that note, what are we going to be covering on our next episode?
On that cheery note, for our next episode, we are going to be covering something that seemed fitting for the times. Independence Day.
Will Smith.
I mean, like, we kind of missed our 4th of July opportunity, but, you know, we're still living in a disastrous dystopia.
Yeah.
Will Smith is still in the headlines, you know.
Yeah.
Let's just go for
Let's
it.
go for it. Oh. Where can our listeners find you on the internet if they want to see more stuffs of
I'm
yours?
all over the internet at Katrinaosity or Katrina Sherwood if you want to see some political stuff.
Nice. Check out her YouTube. You can check out everything that's MDXpods related at MDXpods.com, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at MDXpods. If you want to support the show on Patreon, it's patreon.com/MDXpods. But right now I'm going to say don't give us any money on Patreon. Go support, some grassroots law kind of things, some Black Lives Matter stuff. It's still important. Even though the
Still
protests
important.
aren't like as big, it's still important.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.